Time has a remarkable way of preserving certainty and uncertainty side by side. Nowhere is that contrast more striking than in the American West, where expanding frontiers, remote settlements, and fragmented records left enduring questions that continue to challenge careful investigation. Behind familiar tales of lawmen, outlaws, and pioneers lie documented cases that resist simple conclusions, inviting renewed examination through evidence and reason. Settle in as we uncover the evidence, the unanswered clues, and the events that continue to challenge historians today. Rising from the rugged landscape of southern New Mexico, Victorio Peak stands as a solitary limestone formation surrounded by dry grasslands, scattered cactus, and distant mountain ranges shimmering beneath the desert sun. The terrain appears quiet and almost timeless, shaped by centuries of wind and heat. Yet beneath this unassuming summit lies one of the most enduring treasure legends in American history, a story built from sworn testimony, military restrictions, conflicting accounts, and evidence that has never been assembled into a universally accepted explanation. The story entered public attention in the late 1930s when local prospector Milton Doc Noss reportedly discovered a concealed entrance inside Victorio Peak. According to his account, a narrow shaft descended into a network of chambers unlike any natural cave. He described carefully constructed passageways leading to rooms filled with remarkable artifacts. Among the reported discoveries were stacks of gold bars, chests of coins, religious objects, antique weapons, and even human skeletons arranged in ways that suggested deliberate burial rather than accidental entrapment. These extraordinary claims immediately raised difficult questions. If such chambers truly existed, who created them? When were they sealed? And why would such immense wealth remain untouched for generations? The most widely discussed explanation centers on Spanish colonial activity. During the 16th and 17th centuries, Spanish expeditions explored large portions of what is now the American Southwest. Historical records confirm that prospecting, mining, and transportation of precious metals were common practices. Some researchers have suggested that Victorio Peak may have served as a secret storage site for gold awaiting transport south. Others argue that no surviving Spanish documents clearly identify such a cache, leaving this interpretation supported more by circumstantial evidence than direct proof. Another theory connects the treasure to the turmoil of 19th century Mexico. Political upheaval, military campaigns, and shifting control of valuable mining regions created opportunities for wealth to disappear without reliable documentation. Could a convoy carrying bullion have sought refuge within the mountain? If so, why was no successful recovery ever recorded? Attention soon shifted away from the treasure itself and toward the events that followed its alleged discovery. Victorio Peak later became part of the White Sands Missile Range, placing the area under military control. Access grew increasingly restricted, and several searches reportedly took place under official supervision. Witnesses offered differing accounts of what those expeditions uncovered. Some insisted valuable material had been removed. Others maintained that extensive searches revealed little of significance. The uncertainty surrounding these expeditions has fueled decades of speculation. Supporters of the original discovery point to affidavits, interviews, and repeated attempts to gain access to the site as indications that something substantial once existed. Skeptics counter that memories changed over time, physical evidence remained limited, and many claims relied heavily on second-hand testimony rather than independently verified documentation. Adding another layer of complexity are reports describing sophisticated stone doors, concealed tunnels, and mechanisms that appeared intentionally designed to discourage intruders. Geological studies acknowledge that limestone formations can produce complex cave systems through natural processes. Still, determining where natural geology ends and deliberate construction begins has proven difficult, particularly given the limited opportunity for modern archaeological investigation. Over the decades, treasure hunters, historians, geologists, and journalists have each approached Victorio Peak from different perspectives. Some search for physical evidence buried beneath layers of rock. Others examine archival records, hoping a forgotten map, diary, or military report might clarify the sequence of events. Every new lead seems to answer one question while raising another. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not whether treasure once rested inside the mountain, but whether the full story has ever been told. Did Doc Noss truly uncover an extraordinary underground complex? Or did a mixture of fragmented evidence, fading memories, and enduring legend gradually transform an ordinary discovery into one of the American West's most debated enigmas? Until every chamber is explored and every surviving record examined, Victorio Peak continues to stand in the desert, inviting careful investigation and leaving room for the possibility that part of its story still lies beyond reach. If Victorio Peak reminds us how uncertain physical evidence can become once time, memory, and restricted access begin to shape a story, the next mystery shifts the search from sealed chambers to an entire landscape. Here, the treasure is not believed to rest beneath a single mountain, but somewhere within a vast wilderness where every canyon, ridge, and dry creek seems capable of concealing another possibility. The high country of western New Mexico stretches across rugged volcanic mesas, dense pine forests, and steep canyons carved over countless centuries. During sunrise, long shadows sweep across rocky slopes, while afternoon storms can transform quiet valleys into difficult terrain within minutes. It is a landscape that rewards patience but offers few landmarks that remain unchanged from one generation to the next. In such country, even a carefully remembered route can gradually disappear. This is the setting for one of the American West's most enduring treasure legends, the Lost Adams Diggings. Unlike many treasure stories centered on buried coins or hidden vaults, the Lost Adams Diggings revolves around a rich gold deposit believed to exist somewhere in the mountains. According to the traditional account, a man known simply as Adams joined a group traveling through the Southwest during the 19th century. Guided by indigenous people under circumstances that remain debated, the party reportedly reached an exceptionally rich gold-bearing location. The deposit was said to contain gold in such abundance that samples could be gathered with surprising ease. The journey back, however, proved far more difficult than the journey in. Accounts differ on nearly every important detail. Some versions describe attacks that scattered the expedition. Others speak of confusion over landmarks, making it impossible to relocate the site despite repeated efforts. As the story spread, the precise location became increasingly uncertain. Was the mine located in the mountains near present-day New Mexico, within Arizona, or somewhere between shifting territorial boundaries that looked very different during the 19th century? Historical records confirm that numerous gold discoveries occurred throughout the American Southwest during this period. Mining camps appeared rapidly, flourished briefly, and sometimes disappeared just as quickly after veins were exhausted or abandoned. Rich deposits certainly existed, making the central idea behind the legend entirely plausible. The challenge lies in separating documented mining activity from stories passed down through decades of retelling. Researchers have examined journals, newspaper reports, prospecting maps, and personal correspondence in an effort to identify the original route described in the legend. Yet, every proposed solution encounters familiar obstacles. Distances vary between accounts. Geographic descriptions often contradict one another. Mountain peaks that seemed unmistakable to one witness resemble dozens of others when viewed from a different direction. Some historians suggest that Adams may have intentionally concealed the location, hoping to return later under more favorable circumstances. Others believed the deposit was real, but became impossible to relocate after key members of the expedition died or scattered. There is also the possibility that several unrelated discoveries gradually merged into a single narrative, creating a legend assembled from fragments of different expeditions, rather than one identifiable event. Among more speculative theories, some treasure hunters argue that the mine remains undiscovered because dramatic geological changes altered the landscape. Rock slides, erosion, wildfire, and dense vegetation can significantly change familiar terrain over many decades. Others propose that early descriptions contained deliberate inaccuracies, either to discourage competitors or to protect valuable claims. Without contemporary documentation confirming those alterations, such ideas remain possibilities rather than established conclusions. Modern technology has transformed the search. Satellite imagery, digital elevation models, historical map overlays, and geographic information systems allow researchers to compare old descriptions with today's terrain in ways unavailable to earlier generations. Even so, advanced tools cannot resolve contradictions that originate in uncertain testimony. Technology can analyze the landscape, but it cannot verify memories recorded long after the events themselves. Perhaps this explains why the Lost Adams diggings continues to captivate historians, geologists, and experienced prospectors alike. The legend stands at the intersection of documented frontier history and oral tradition, where each new interpretation sheds light on one aspect while leaving another in shadow. Somewhere among the mesas, forests, and winding canyons, the answer may be waiting, or perhaps the true mystery lies in whether the original destination ever existed exactly as it has been remembered for more than a century. If the search for the lost Adams diggings demonstrates how a landscape can gradually erase the path to a single location, the next legend expands that uncertainty even further. Here, the mystery is carried not by maps alone, but by memory, by a handful of unusually colored stones, a weathered wooden bucket, and a trail that crossed thousands of miles before anyone realized what might have been left behind. The broad valleys and volcanic plateaus of the Pacific Northwest possess a quiet grandeur that often conceals the complexity of their past. Sagebrush stretches toward distant mountain ranges, rivers carve deep canyons through ancient basalt, and long wagon routes fade into open country where familiar landmarks become increasingly difficult to identify. It was along these demanding trails, traveled by thousands of emigrants during the 19th century, that one of the West's most enduring gold legends is said to have begun. The story of the lost Blue Bucket gold is traditionally linked to families traveling the Oregon Trail during the 1840s. According to the most common version, a group of pioneers stopped near a dry streambed to rest. While gathering water or exploring the surrounding ground, several members noticed unusually heavy rocks scattered across the area. The stones displayed a dull yellow appearance that attracted little attention at first. Some were reportedly collected and placed inside a blue bucket, valued more for their curious appearance than for any suspected wealth. Only after the travelers reached established settlements did someone recognize that the rocks might have been nearly pure gold. If the account is accurate, the implications are remarkable. Rather than discovering a worked mine, the emigrants may have stumbled upon naturally occurring placer gold, resting openly on the surface or within a shallow wash. Such deposits are not unknown in geological history. Streams can carry gold significant distances from its original source, concentrating heavier material in gravel bars and dry channels over long periods. Yet, finding pieces substantial enough to inspire this legend would still represent an exceptional occurrence. The immediate challenge was obvious. The emigrants had continued their journey without carefully recording the location. Their route had crossed unfamiliar terrain under difficult conditions, guided by changing weather, limited maps, and pressing concerns far more immediate than mineral exploration. Retracing those steps later proved far more complicated than anyone anticipated. As news of the story spread, prospectors began searching for the original site. Throughout the second half of the 19th century, numerous expeditions attempted to match diary entries, trail descriptions, and remembered landmarks with the geography of present-day Oregon and neighboring regions. Despite determined efforts, no consensus emerged regarding where the discovery supposedly occurred. Several explanations have been proposed by historians. One possibility is that the travelers genuinely encountered gold, but misremembered distances and directions after completing an exhausting migration. Human memory, particularly following months of difficult travel, often compresses or rearranges sequences of events. Another interpretation suggests that multiple pioneer accounts gradually merged into a single narrative, creating a legend richer than any individual experience. Geologists have also entered the discussion. Some note that volcanic activity and complex erosion patterns throughout the Pacific Northwest have produced environments capable of concentrating mineral deposits. Others argue that while isolated placer deposits certainly exist, no verified geological evidence has confirmed a source matching the extraordinary descriptions found in later retellings. More speculative theories continue to circulate. Some treasure hunters believe the original stream changed course long ago, burying the deposit beneath layers of sediment. Others suggest that later prospectors quietly located the site but concealed their success to prevent competition. These possibilities remain difficult to evaluate, largely because they depend upon assumptions that have never been supported by conclusive documentation. What makes the lost Blue Bucket Gold especially compelling is that it rests at the intersection of migration history and frontier folklore. Unlike legends centered on outlaws or hidden fortunes, this story begins with ordinary families whose primary goal was reaching a new home. Their reported discovery, whether entirely accurate, partially remembered, or transformed through generations of retelling, reflects the unpredictable nature of life along the Western trails. Today, the Oregon Trail is studied through preserved wagon ruts, pioneer journals, archaeological sites, and historical records that illuminate one of North America's defining migrations. Yet, somewhere within those miles of open country remains a question that careful research has never fully resolved. Did those travelers unknowingly leave behind one of the richest surface gold discoveries ever reported? Or has the true location been obscured by time so completely that it can no longer be distinguished from the countless landscapes through which they passed? Perhaps the answer still waits where the trail grows quiet and the ground reveals only what patient eyes are prepared to notice. If the legend of the lost Blue Bucket Gold reveals how an ordinary journey can give rise to an enduring search, the next story begins with the collapse of an empire. This time, the trail does not lead to scattered nuggets resting in a dry streambed, but to the enduring question of whether an immense royal fortune was ever spirited away before history could record its final destination. The rugged mountains, deep canyons, and isolated deserts of the American Southwest have long inspired stories of concealed wealth. Their vast distances, limited water sources, and difficult terrain created natural refuges where travelers could disappear from established routes for days at a time. It is within this expansive landscape that the legend of the Montezuma Treasure gradually took shape, blending documented history with generations of frontier tradition. The historical foundation begins in the early 16th century. During the Spanish conquest of the Aztec Empire, enormous quantities of gold, silver, gemstones, and ceremonial objects changed hands under chaotic and often violent circumstances. Contemporary accounts confirm that remarkable wealth existed within the imperial capital, although many descriptions were likely influenced by the perspectives and ambitions of those who recorded them. Even so, historians generally agree that not every valuable object was carefully inventoried or successfully recovered. From this uncertainty emerged one of the West's most persistent legends. According to various traditions, a portion of the imperial treasure was removed before it could be seized, transported northward by loyal followers or later travelers, and concealed somewhere within the mountains of present-day Mexico or the American Southwest. Over time, the alleged hiding place shifted from one remote range to another, adapting to local geography and regional folklore. Could such a journey have been possible? Historians note that long-distance travel and trade networks already connected extensive regions of North America well before European arrival. Valuable goods moved across remarkable distances through established routes. Yet no verified historical document confirms that a royal treasure followed the path described in later legends. The absence of contemporary evidence has left researchers relying largely on oral traditions, 19th-century reports, and scattered personal accounts. Treasure hunters have searched countless caves, abandoned mines, and narrow canyons believed to match descriptions passed down through generations. Occasionally, isolated discoveries of colonial-era artifacts have revived interest in particular locations. However, such finds have never established a direct connection to the legendary cache itself. Objects from different periods often become intertwined in local storytelling, making careful historical interpretation especially important. More speculative theories suggest that early Spanish explorers, missionaries, or independent prospectors may have encountered part of the treasure and deliberately concealed any knowledge of it. Others argue that the legend gradually absorbed elements from unrelated discoveries, eventually evolving into a single narrative centered on the name of Montezuma. Without verifiable records, these interpretations remain possibilities rather than historical conclusions. What continues to fascinate researchers is not simply the prospect of hidden wealth, but the way documented events leave room for enduring uncertainty. A powerful empire unquestionably possessed extraordinary riches, and history records the turmoil that followed its conquest. Yet the precise fate of every valuable object has never been established with complete certainty. Somewhere between archival records, oral tradition, and the rugged landscapes of the Southwest, the story remains unfinished, inviting each generation to consider whether the greatest clue has yet to be recognized. If the legend of the Montezuma treasure illustrates how the fall of an empire can leave unanswered questions echoing through centuries, the next mystery narrows its focus to a single canyon where history and legend appear to converge. Here, the search is not only for gold or silver, but for the final traces of a frontier shaped by conflict, survival, and the harsh realities of the American Southwest. Skeleton Canyon cuts through the rugged landscape near the border of Arizona and New Mexico, its steep rock walls rising above narrow washes carved by seasonal floods. Mesquite, prickly pear, and scattered juniper cling to the dry ground, while the silence of the desert is broken only by the wind moving through the canyon's bends. Even today, the terrain feels isolated. The twisting passages limit visibility, making it easy to understand why generations of travelers regarded the canyon with equal measures of caution and respect. The canyon carries undeniable historical significance. It is widely known as the place where the Apache leader Geronimo surrendered in 1886, bringing one of the final chapters of the Apache Wars to a close. Long before and long after that event, the region served as a difficult crossroads for traders, soldiers, prospectors, ranchers, and indigenous communities, each leaving behind fragments of a larger story. Those documented events alone would make Skeleton Canyon historically important. Yet another narrative has persisted alongside them for well over a century. According to frontier tradition, somewhere within the maze of cliffs and hidden ravines lies a concealed cache of treasure. The details vary considerably depending on the source. Some accounts describe gold taken during raids and hidden for safekeeping. Others speak of Spanish bullion transported through dangerous territory before disappearing without explanation. A few versions even suggest that multiple caches, deposited by different groups over many decades, became intertwined until they formed a single enduring legend. Could any of these stories be rooted in real events? Historical records confirm that valuable goods regularly moved through the Southwest during the 18th and 19th centuries. Freight wagons carried coins, supplies, mining equipment, and trade goods across long distances, often through isolated country where attacks, accidents, or sudden changes in weather posed constant risks. In such conditions, temporarily concealing valuable cargo would have been a practical decision if recovery seemed possible at a later time. Researchers have therefore examined the legend through a practical lens, rather than treating it as simple folklore. They compare military reports, old transportation routes, mining records, and personal journals in an effort to identify incidents that may have inspired the stories. Several documented robberies and disappearances occurred throughout the region, although none can be directly connected to a treasure hidden inside Skeleton Canyon itself. The geography of the canyon has also contributed to its reputation. Numerous side passages branch away from the main wash, leading to shallow caves, rock shelters, and elevated ledges that are difficult to notice from below. Seasonal flooding continually reshapes the landscape, moving sediment and exposing or covering features from one year to the next. A location that appeared obvious to someone in the 19th century might look entirely different today. As with many enduring treasure legends, eyewitness testimony presents both valuable clues and significant challenges. Throughout the 20th century, various individuals claim to have discovered markers carved into stone, abandoned campsites, or partially collapsed entrances leading toward concealed chambers. Yet repeated investigations rarely produced evidence strong enough to satisfy professional historians or archaeologists. Some reported markers were eventually identified as natural weathering patterns, while others simply could not be relocated by later searchers. Among more speculative interpretations, some believe that experienced prospectors quietly recovered whatever valuables once existed and deliberately kept the discovery confidential. Others suggest that stories associated with neighboring canyons gradually became attached to Skeleton Canyon because of its historical prominence. There is also the possibility that the treasure itself was never a single cache at all, but a collection of separate incidents that merged over decades of retelling into one compelling frontier legend. The enduring appeal of Skeleton Canyon may lie less in the promise of wealth than in the setting itself. It represents a place where documented history and oral tradition occupy the same landscape. The surrender of Geronimo is supported by extensive historical evidence. The movement of miners, soldiers, traders, and outlaws through the region is equally well documented. Between those established facts remains a quieter space where incomplete records leave room for careful speculation. Modern explorers continue to study historical maps, aerial imagery, geological formations, and archival documents, hoping to separate historical reality from accumulated legend. Each investigation adds another layer of understanding, yet no expedition has produced conclusive proof that resolves the story once and for all. The canyon remains much as it has for generations, silent, weathered, and difficult to fully understand. Perhaps that is why Skeleton Canyon continues to command attention long after the frontier itself has faded into history. Its cliffs preserve echoes of documented events, while its unexplored corners invite thoughtful curiosity rather than certainty. Somewhere among the winding washes and weathered stone, there may still be evidence waiting to emerge. Or perhaps the greatest treasure is the enduring question of how much of the American West still resists a final explanation. If Skeleton Canyon reminds us that history and legend often occupy the same landscape, the next mystery shifts our attention farther west, into a desert where towering saguaro cacti stand watch over rocky hills and dry arroyos. Here, the search is not for a buried cache left behind in haste, but for a mine that many believe once produced extraordinary riches before slipping beyond the reach of every map that followed. The Superstition Mountains of central Arizona rise sharply from the surrounding Sonoran Desert, their jagged volcanic peaks glowing deep red at sunrise and fading into purple as evening approaches. Sparse rainfall, intense summer heat, and rugged canyons have shaped a landscape that appears both beautiful and unforgiving. Every ridge casts long shadows over hidden ravines, while ancient rock formations create natural landmarks that can appear remarkably different depending on the angle of the light. It is a place where distance can be difficult to judge and familiar paths can quickly disappear into the terrain. Among the many legends connected to these mountains, the story of the lost Gunsight mine has quietly endured for generations. Although often overshadowed by the more widely known tale of the lost Dutchman mine, the Gunsight mine possesses its own distinctive history, attracting prospectors, historians, and geologists who continue to debate whether it was ever a real mining site or the product of overlapping frontier traditions. The name itself is said to originate from a nearby rock formation, resembling the notch of a rifle's gun sight. According to the most familiar accounts, a prospector discovered an exceptionally rich vein of gold somewhere near this landmark during the 19th century. Samples reportedly yielded remarkable quantities of precious metal, suggesting that a substantial deposit lay beneath the surface. Yet before the mine could be fully developed or accurately recorded, its discoverer either died, disappeared, or lost the ability to relocate the site. From that point forward, the story becomes increasingly difficult to verify. Arizona experienced numerous gold discoveries throughout the 19th century, particularly after organized prospecting expanded across the territory. Historical records document hundreds of small mining claims, many of which were worked only briefly before being abandoned. Some produced modest returns, while others generated considerable wealth for short periods before the ore was exhausted. Against this historical backdrop, the existence of another isolated mine is certainly plausible. The challenge lies in identifying evidence that distinguishes the lost Gunsight mine from the many genuine claims that have faded into history. Researchers studying the legend often encounter conflicting descriptions. Some narratives place the mine deep within the Superstition Mountains, while others locate it nearer the surrounding foothills. Distances between landmarks vary considerably, and descriptions recorded decades apart frequently contradict one another. Was the original location inaccurately remembered, or were different discoveries gradually combined into a single story? The landscape itself complicates every investigation. Erosion continually alters washes and canyon floors, while seasonal flooding can bury old trails beneath fresh layers of sediment. Vegetation changes over time, and landmarks once considered obvious may become difficult to identify after decades of natural weathering. Even experienced hikers acknowledge that navigating the superstitions requires careful preparation, making it understandable that 19th century prospectors could struggle to relocate an isolated mineral deposit. Geologists offer a measured perspective on the legend. The mountain range contains mineralized zones capable of producing gold, silver, and other valuable ores. Numerous documented mines operated within the broader region, confirming that the underlying geology supports the possibility of undiscovered deposits. At the same time, no verified survey has identified a mine matching the exceptional richness described in the traditional accounts. More speculative explanations continue to circulate among treasure hunters. Some believe the original entrance collapsed following earthquakes or rockfalls, sealing the richest portion of the vein beneath tons of stone. Others suggest that a successful prospector quietly extracted the most valuable ore before abandoning the claim without public notice. Another interpretation proposes that the Gunsight mine never existed as a separate location at all, but gradually emerged from stories surrounding several nearby mines whose histories became intertwined over time. Despite decades of exploration, modern technology has provided few definitive answers. Satellite imagery, geological mapping, historical claim records, and aerial surveys have improved researchers' understanding of the region, yet none has resolved the central question. Every promising clue seems to introduce another uncertainty, encouraging fresh investigations while preserving the legend's enduring appeal. Perhaps that is why the lost Gunsight mine continues to occupy such a distinctive place in the folklore of the American West. It is a reminder that even landscapes studied for generations can still resist complete understanding. Somewhere among the weathered cliffs and silent canyons of the Superstition Mountains, there may yet be evidence capable of clarifying the story, or perhaps the mine's greatest legacy is the enduring search itself, carried forward by those who continue to follow traces that history has never fully erased. If the lost Gunsight mine illustrates how an entire mountain range can conceal a single unanswered question, the next legend carries that uncertainty into one of the harshest environments in North America. Here, the landscape itself becomes the greatest obstacle, where shifting sand, relentless heat, and vast distances have the power to erase even the most carefully remembered path. Southern California's Colorado desert stretches toward the horizon in broad, sunlit expanses of sand, gravel plains, and barren hills sculpted by wind over thousands of years. Sparse vegetation clings to the dry earth, while distant mountain ranges shimmer beneath the desert haze. During the day, intense sunlight flattens the landscape into a sea of muted colors. By evening, long shadows settle across the dunes, revealing ridges and shallow washes that seem to change shape with every passing season. In such an environment, permanence is an illusion. Trails disappear, landmarks shift, and memory is often tested against a landscape that rarely offers certainty. It is within this unforgiving setting that the legend of Pegleg Smith Gold has endured for nearly 2 centuries. The story is traditionally associated with Thomas L. Pegleg Smith, a mountain man, trapper, explorer, and storyteller who traveled widely throughout the American West during the early 19th century. Smith was a well-documented historical figure, known for his colorful personality and adventurous life. Having lost part of one leg in an accident, he famously wore a wooden prosthetic, earning the nickname that has remained inseparable from his legacy. According to the most familiar version of the legend, Smith was traveling through the California desert when he noticed several dark-colored rocks scattered across the ground. Curious, he collected a few samples, later discovering that they contained exceptionally rich gold. Rather than finding a conventional mine carved into the earth, he reportedly stumbled upon loose quartz stones heavily laced with precious metal, lying openly across the desert floor. The discovery sounded almost too simple. Smith is said to have returned to civilization carrying enough of the unusual rocks to convince others of their remarkable value. Yet despite repeated attempts, he was never able to relocate the exact site. Whether because of the immense scale of the desert, the lack of reliable landmarks, or fading memory, the location remained elusive. Could such an event have occurred? Geologists acknowledge that gold-bearing quartz is common in many mining districts, and erosion can occasionally scatter mineral-rich fragments away from their original source. Under the right conditions, isolated pieces may appear far from the vein from which they originated. However, finding enough exceptionally rich material resting openly on the surface to inspire the Pegleg legend would be highly unusual. This balance between geological possibility and extraordinary circumstance has kept the story alive among researchers for generations. Historical documentation presents additional challenges. While Pegleg Smith unquestionably existed, Contemporary records describing the gold discovery are limited. Much of the story comes from later newspaper accounts, oral traditions, and recollections recorded years after the alleged events. As with many frontier legends, each retelling introduced subtle differences. Some accounts describe black-coated gold nuggets. Others mention smooth quartz stones streaked with brilliant yellow metal. Even the general location shifts between versions, expanding or narrowing the search area depending on the source. Throughout the late 19th and 20th centuries, prospectors organized numerous expeditions in hopes of rediscovering the site. Old journals were examined, wagon routes reconstructed, and geological formations compared with historical descriptions. Despite these efforts, no discovery has been universally accepted as the legendary Pegleg deposit. Several promising finds generated brief excitement before proving unrelated or insufficient to explain the original accounts. More speculative theories have naturally emerged over time. Some suggest the deposit was quickly exhausted by unknown prospectors who chose not to publicize their success. Others believe shifting sands gradually buried the surface exposure, concealing it beneath layers of wind-blown sediment. Another interpretation proposes that Pegleg Smith unintentionally combined memories from several separate locations into a single narrative that became increasingly difficult to distinguish from folklore. Modern satellite imagery, geological surveys, and mineral mapping have significantly improved our understanding of the California desert. Yet even these sophisticated tools cannot reconstruct a journey remembered only through fragmentary accounts. The vastness of the landscape continues to challenge every search, just as it challenged travelers nearly 200 years ago. Perhaps that is the enduring power of the Pegleg Smith gold legend. It rests not on tales of elaborate vaults or carefully buried treasure, but on the possibility that extraordinary wealth once lay exposed beneath the open sky, waiting for a passerby with attentive eyes. Whether the gold was real, misplaced, misunderstood, or quietly recovered long ago remains uncertain. Somewhere among the silent washes and sunlit desert ridges, the answer may still lie beyond the next horizon, waiting for history to reveal one more piece of its unfinished story. If the legend of Pegleg Smith gold suggests that fortune can disappear into an endless desert with little more than memory to mark its place, the next story carries us deeper into that same unforgiving landscape. Here, the search leads into Death Valley itself, where extreme heat, immense distances, and silent mountain ranges have preserved one of the West's most enduring mining enigmas. At first light, Death Valley appears almost motionless. Vast salt flats stretch towards jagged peaks stained in shades of brown, red, and gold, while dry washes weave through the barren ground like faded pathways from another era. Summer temperatures can rise to extraordinary levels, and rainfall is so infrequent that the landscape changes only gradually over decades. Yet, beneath this stark beauty lies a remarkably complex geological history, one that has attracted miners, surveyors, and prospectors since the 19th century. Among the many legends born from this harsh environment, few have inspired as many determined searches as the tale of the lost Breyfogle mine. The story centers on William Breyfogle, a prospector whose name appears in historical accounts from the early 1860s. According to the traditional narrative, Breyfogle entered the desert in search of mineral wealth and unexpectedly discovered an exceptionally rich gold deposit. Before he could establish a permanent claim, however, events took a dramatic turn. Several versions of the story describe him being captured during his journey and eventually escaping after a difficult ordeal. Exhausted and disoriented, he reportedly found his way back to settled communities carrying samples of remarkably high-grade ore. Those samples convinced many that his discovery had been genuine. The problem was that Breyfogle could no longer identify where the mine had been located. Repeated attempts to retrace his route ended in disappointment. The immense scale of Death Valley, combined with the physical hardship of traveling through it, made precise navigation extraordinarily difficult during the 19th century. Distances were often estimated rather than measured. Landmarks appeared different depending on weather and light, and reliable maps remained incomplete for many portions of the region. Historians generally agree that prospectors frequently made valuable discoveries under such challenging conditions. California and Nevada experienced numerous mining booms during this period, and isolated claims sometimes produced impressive quantities of gold before being abandoned. Against that historical backdrop, Breyfogle's account is not inherently implausible. The uncertainty arises from the absence of detailed documentation capable of confirming exactly where he traveled or what he found. Researchers have spent decades comparing surviving newspaper reports, personal letters, prospecting journals, and early survey records in an effort to reconstruct his movements. Yet each source introduces new complications. Some accounts describe the mine as lying near volcanic hills, while others place it within remote canyon systems or along dry stream beds. Even Breyfogle's own recollections, as preserved through later reports, appear to contain inconsistencies that make precise reconstruction difficult. Geology adds another layer to the mystery. Death Valley and the surrounding mountain ranges contain complex mineral formations created through millions of years of tectonic activity and volcanic processes. Gold-bearing quartz veins are known to exist throughout parts of the region, and numerous productive mines operated nearby during the 19th century. From a scientific perspective, the existence of another undiscovered deposit is entirely possible. Determining whether it corresponds to the legendary Breyfogle mine, however, has remained beyond the reach of available evidence. Over time, more speculative interpretations emerged. Some treasure hunters believe Breyfogle intentionally concealed the location to protect a future claim, revealing only enough information to prove that his discovery was real. Others argue that illness, dehydration, or the psychological effects of prolonged exposure to the desert may have altered his memory, making later descriptions unintentionally inaccurate. Another possibility is that subsequent storytellers blended separate mining accounts into a single legend, gradually expanding its reputation while obscuring its historical origins. Modern exploration has introduced tools unimaginable to 19th century prospectors. High-resolution satellite imagery, geological mapping, aerial surveys, and historical data analysis have narrowed certain possibilities while eliminating others. Even with these advances, no confirmed discovery has settled the question. The desert continues to guard its silence, offering clues that remain open to interpretation rather than certainty. Perhaps that is why the lost Breyfogle mine still occupies such a distinctive place in the history of the American West. It is not merely the promise of hidden gold that sustains interest, but the image of a lone prospector emerging from one of the continent's harshest landscapes, carrying evidence of a discovery he could never fully explain. Somewhere beyond the shimmering heat and weathered ridges of Death Valley, the final chapter of that journey may still remain unwritten, waiting for the evidence that has eluded generations of careful searchers. If the lost Breyfogle mine reveals how easily a valuable discovery can become separated from its location, the next legend carries that uncertainty into a landscape where rugged terrain and complex history have long challenged explorers. Deep within southeastern Arizona, the Chiricahua Mountains rise above the desert floor, a dramatic range of volcanic formations, forested slopes, and narrow canyons where stories of hidden wealth have persisted for generations. The Chiricahua Mountains stand apart from the surrounding desert like a natural fortress. Towering rock formations, shaped by ancient volcanic activity, create a landscape of towering columns, hidden valleys, and winding passages. Pine forests cover the higher elevations, while dry grasslands and rocky slopes dominate the lower terrain. For centuries, these mountains have served as a crossroads between indigenous communities, explorers, military forces, ranchers, and prospectors. Their isolation offered protection, but it also made navigation difficult, leaving countless trails and locations vulnerable to uncertainty. Among the many mining legends associated with the region is the story of the Phantom Mine, a supposed source of extraordinary mineral wealth that has remained impossible to verify. The origins of the legend are difficult to separate from the broader history of mining in Arizona. During the 19th century, prospectors entered remote mountain ranges throughout the territory searching for gold, silver, and copper. Many discoveries were documented, and some developed into productive mining operations. Others existed only briefly, abandoned when transportation difficulties, declining ore quality, or financial challenges made continued work impossible. The Phantom Mine belongs to the second category of stories, one built around reports, fragments, and unanswered questions. According to traditional accounts, a prospector discovered a remarkably rich vein somewhere within the Chiricahua Mountains. The location was said to contain valuable ore, but the discovery was never properly recorded or developed. In some versions of the story, the finder died before returning to the site. In others, the location was deliberately concealed to prevent competitors from taking possession of the claim. Over time, details became increasingly uncertain, with different accounts placing the mine in separate parts of the mountain range. Could a valuable mine truly have existed without leaving a clearer historical record? Researchers approach the legend cautiously. The geology of the Chiricahua region supports the possibility of mineral deposits, and nearby areas have produced commercially important resources. However, geological potential alone does not confirm the existence of a lost mine. Without verified samples, mining records, or physical remains, the Phantom Mine remains an unresolved possibility rather than an established discovery. The search for the location has been complicated by the landscape itself. Volcanic formations can create confusing terrain, with countless ridges and canyons appearing similar from different viewpoints. Trails used by early prospectors may have disappeared through erosion, wildfire, or natural changes in vegetation. Landmarks described in 19th century accounts may no longer appear as they once did, making modern attempts at reconstruction extremely challenging. Some historians believe the legend may have developed from several genuine mining incidents that were gradually combined into one story. A small abandoned claim, an undocumented prospecting discovery, or a failed mining venture could have provided the foundation for later retellings. As stories traveled through mining camps and local communities, details may have expanded, transforming ordinary events into a more dramatic search for hidden wealth. More speculative interpretations suggest that the mine was intentionally concealed and that only a few individuals ever knew its true location. Others believe that valuable ore may have been removed quietly by later prospectors who left little evidence behind. These possibilities remain difficult to evaluate because they depend on events for which no reliable documentation has survived. Modern exploration methods have changed the way researchers examine lost mine legends. Geological surveys, historical mapping, and satellite imagery provide information that earlier generations could never access. Yet, technology can only reveal patterns within the landscape. It cannot restore missing records or confirm stories built from decades of uncertain memory. The Phantom Mine of the Chiricahua Mountains continues to occupy the space between documented mining history and frontier tradition. The region certainly witnessed real discoveries, real struggles, and real searches for wealth. Whether the Phantom Mine represents an undiscovered deposit, a forgotten claim, or a legend shaped by years of retelling remains unanswered. Among the quiet canyons and towering stone formations of the Chiricahuas, the question endures. Was there once a mine waiting to be found? Or has the passage of time transformed a simple prospecting tale into one of the West's most persistent mysteries? If the phantom mine of the Chiricahua Mountains reminds us how easily a discovery can fade into uncertainty, the next legend takes us deeper into the forgotten corners of the American Southwest, where faith, exploration, and the search for wealth became intertwined. Here, the mystery centers not only on a lost mine, but on the possibility that a valuable discovery was connected to a time when missionaries, settlers, and explorers crossed some of the continent's most challenging landscapes. The deserts and mountain ranges of the Southwest are filled with traces of earlier journeys. Dry valleys stretch beneath endless skies, rugged peaks rise above ancient trails, and abandoned routes disappear into terrain that has changed little over centuries. Among these landscapes, old stone ruins, mission pathways, and mining regions reveal evidence of generations searching for survival and opportunity. It is within this setting that the legend of the lost Padre mine has continued to capture the attention of historians and treasure seekers. The story of the lost Padre mine is traditionally linked to the era of Spanish exploration and missionary activity in the region. According to various accounts, a Catholic priest, or padre, discovered a remarkably rich source of precious metal while traveling through remote territory. Some versions describe the mine as containing gold, while others suggest silver or a combination of valuable ores. The exact location changes depending on the account, with possible sites proposed throughout parts of the Southwest where Spanish expeditions once traveled. Historical records confirm that Spanish explorers and missionaries moved through vast areas of North America, beginning in the 16th century. Mining was an important part of colonial expansion, and numerous Spanish-era mines operated throughout regions that are now part of the southwestern United States and northern Mexico. These documented activities provide a realistic foundation for legends of forgotten workings. However, no surviving record has conclusively identified a mine matching the descriptions associated with the lost Padre mine. The mystery deepens because many versions of the story involve secrecy. Some accounts suggest that the location was deliberately protected, either because the discovery occurred during a period of conflict or because those who knew the route wished to prevent others from claiming the wealth. Other versions claim that knowledge of the mine disappeared when the original discoverers died, leaving only vague directions and scattered clues behind. Could a valuable Spanish-era mine have escaped documentation for so long? Researchers approach the possibility with caution. Remote mineral deposits were sometimes abandoned when transportation became too difficult, local conditions became dangerous, or political changes disrupted operations. A small mine worked briefly by a limited group of people could leave very little archaeological evidence, especially after centuries of erosion, weather, and natural changes to the landscape. Treasure hunters have searched areas connected to the legend using old maps, mission records, and descriptions passed down through generations. Some have reported finding stone structures, old tools, or traces of early mining activity. Yet, none of these discoveries have been universally accepted as proof of the legendary mine. In many cases, artifacts from different periods have created new questions rather than providing clear answers. More speculative interpretations suggest that the lost Padre mine may have been intentionally concealed, or that valuable material was removed long ago by individuals who never revealed their discovery. Others believe the legend may represent a combination of several forgotten mining sites, blended together over time into a single story attached to the image of a solitary priest and a hidden source of wealth. Modern historical research has improved our understanding of Spanish exploration routes, early mining practices, and settlement patterns throughout the Southwest. Yet, even with improved records and advanced technology, some gaps remain. The landscape still contains countless remote areas where evidence may have been altered, buried, or lost entirely. Perhaps the enduring fascination of the lost Padre mine comes from the uncertainty surrounding its origins. The story reflects a real period of exploration and resource discovery, while also carrying the unanswered questions that naturally emerge when records disappear and landscapes change. Somewhere among the mountains, deserts, and forgotten trails of the Southwest, the final clues may still exist, waiting to reveal whether the lost Padre mine was a genuine discovery left behind by history, or a legend that grew from the mysteries of an unexplored frontier. If the lost Padre mine reflects the way forgotten trails and incomplete records can transform historical possibilities into enduring questions, the next legend continues that search through another remote corner of the American West. Here, the mystery begins not with a forgotten mission route, but with a prospector's discovery, a collection of valuable ore, and a location that has remained beyond the reach of those who attempted to find it again. The mountains and deserts of the western frontier are landscapes shaped by extremes. Dry valleys stretch between rugged peaks, narrow canyons cut through layers of ancient stone, and isolated ridges overlook terrain that can appear endless from the ground. For 19th-century prospectors, these regions represented both opportunity and danger. A single promising outcrop could lead to fortune, while a misplaced trail could leave a discovery permanently separated from the person who found it. Among the many legends born from this era is the story of the Rhoades lost gold mine, a tale connected to the pursuit of wealth, the uncertainty of frontier travel, and the challenge of locating a place described only through memory. The legend is associated with a prospector named John Rhoades, whose story has been passed down through different accounts over many decades. According to the traditional narrative, Rhoades discovered a remarkably rich gold deposit somewhere in the remote mountains of the Southwest. The ore was said to be unusually valuable, containing visible traces of gold that suggested the presence of a significant deposit. Yet, the circumstances surrounding the discovery prevented the mine from becoming a documented success. Like many frontier stories, the details become less certain as the account moves further from recorded history. Some versions describe Rhoades revealing samples of the gold-bearing material before attempting to return to the location. Others suggest that circumstances beyond his control prevented him from completing the journey. Whether the obstacle was changing conditions, personal hardship, or simply the difficulty of navigating unfamiliar terrain, the result was the same. The location of the mine became uncertain. Historical context shows that such situations were not unusual. During the 19th century, prospectors frequently explored areas where official maps were incomplete and transportation routes were unreliable. Mining claims were often recorded with limited information, and small discoveries could disappear when their owners lacked the resources to develop them. Many genuine mines were abandoned, relocated, or absorbed into larger operations, leaving behind incomplete records. The possibility of a lost gold deposit in a remote region is therefore not impossible. The western United States contains countless examples of mineral discoveries that were briefly productive before fading from public attention. The difficulty with the Rhoades lost gold mine is not whether gold existed in the broader region, but whether the specific discovery described in the legend can be connected to a real location. Researchers and treasure hunters have approached the mystery from several directions. Some have examined historical mining records, old newspapers, and geological surveys in an attempt to identify areas where the story might have originated. Others have followed descriptions of landmarks mentioned in later accounts, comparing them with modern landscapes. Yet, the lack of precise coordinates, reliable maps, or confirmed artifacts has prevented any search from reaching a definitive conclusion. The terrain itself remains one of the greatest challenges. Mountain landscapes can change significantly over time. Trails once used by miners may disappear, vegetation can obscure landmarks, and natural erosion can alter the appearance of cliffs and valleys. A description that seemed clear to someone standing in the 19th century wilderness may be almost impossible to interpret from a modern perspective. As with many lost mine legends, more speculative explanations have also emerged. Some believe the location was intentionally kept secret by those who knew about it, either to protect the discovery or to prevent competition. Others suggest that later prospectors may have found the deposit and quietly removed the valuable material without leaving records behind. Another possibility is that the story developed from several separate mining events, gradually combining different discoveries into one enduring legend. Modern technology has changed how researchers investigate these stories. Satellite imagery, geological databases, and advanced mapping techniques allow investigators to examine remote areas with greater precision than ever before. However, technology cannot replace missing historical evidence. It can reveal patterns in the landscape, but it cannot confirm a discovery based only on uncertain memories and repeated retellings. The Rhoades lost gold mine remains a fascinating example of how the frontier continues to challenge historical certainty. It exists somewhere between documented mining history and the traditions passed down by generations who believed that remarkable discoveries could still be waiting in the wilderness. Whether the mine represents a genuine forgotten deposit, a misunderstood event, or a legend shaped by time, the question remains open. Somewhere among the mountains and valleys of the West, there may still be traces of the path that led John Rhoades to his reported discovery. The evidence may be buried, overlooked, or perhaps never existed in the form later generations imagined. Until new information emerges, the Rhoades lost gold mine remains another unfinished chapter in the long search for answers within the landscapes of the American frontier. If the Rhoades lost gold mine reminds us how easily a discovery can become separated from its location, the next legend takes that uncertainty into an even more familiar symbol of the frontier: the abandoned cabin. Across the American West, simple wooden structures once marked the presence of miners, trappers, and explorers who ventured into remote country in search of opportunity. Some cabins became permanent settlements. Others disappeared, leaving behind only fragments of stories and questions about what they may have contained. High in the rugged mountain ranges of the West, forests of pine and fir cover steep slopes, while narrow valleys hide beneath layers of snow, rock, and dense vegetation. These landscapes once attracted prospectors searching for gold and silver, but they also created countless challenges. A small shelter built beside a creek or near a promising mineral deposit could serve as a temporary home, a mining headquarters, or a place where valuable discoveries were recorded before circumstances forced someone to leave. Among the many legends connected to these remote regions is the story of the lost cabin mine, a tale that has appeared in different forms throughout Western mining history. Unlike legends centered around a clearly identified prospector or a single documented event, the lost cabin mine represents a broader category of frontier mysteries. Numerous versions describe a lone traveler, miner, or explorer who discovered an exceptionally rich gold deposit near a small cabin hidden in the wilderness. The location was supposedly marked by natural features, nearby streams, or recognizable mountain formations. Yet, after the discovery was revealed, the route to the cabin could never be successfully followed again. The idea of a lost cabin holding the key to a valuable mine became especially compelling during periods of intense gold exploration. Throughout the 19th century, prospectors entered remote territories where maps were incomplete and communication was limited. Many worked alone or in small groups, relying on personal knowledge of the land rather than precise surveying. If a miner died, became injured, or simply failed to return, valuable information about a location could disappear with them. Historical records confirm that abandoned cabins were common throughout mining regions. Some belonged to miners who left after a claim failed. Others were temporary shelters built during exploration. In many cases, these structures eventually collapsed due to weather, fire, or natural decay. A cabin that once served as an obvious landmark could become almost impossible to recognize decades later. This reality forms the foundation of many lost cabin mine stories. Researchers often examine whether the legend may have originated from a genuine mining site whose location was gradually obscured. A forgotten claim, a poorly documented discovery, or an abandoned settlement could easily become transformed over time into a story of hidden wealth waiting to be rediscovered. Searchers have attempted to locate various versions of the lost cabin mine using historical newspapers, mining records, old maps, and geological evidence. Some have followed descriptions of mountain passes, unusual rock formations, or streams mentioned in traditional accounts. However, the lack of consistent details has made identifying one definitive location extremely difficult. The landscape itself creates another obstacle. Mountain environments are constantly changing. Forest growth can conceal old trails, landslides can reshape valleys, and seasonal conditions can alter the appearance of familiar terrain. A landmark described by a 19th century prospector may no longer exist in the same form today, leaving modern explorers to interpret clues that were never intended to survive for generations. More speculative theories suggest that some lost cabin mine stories involve discoveries that were deliberately protected. A miner who found a valuable deposit may have chosen secrecy over publicity, hoping to return when conditions improved. Others believe that certain legends developed from multiple forgotten mines, with separate events gradually merging into one narrative through years of storytelling. Modern research has brought new tools to these searches. Satellite imagery, historical mapping, and geological analysis allow investigators to study remote regions with greater accuracy. Yet, even advanced technology cannot solve a mystery built upon uncertain locations and incomplete accounts. The enduring appeal of the lost cabin mine lies in the possibility that a simple structure in a remote wilderness once marked the beginning of a remarkable discovery. Whether the story points toward a genuine forgotten mine, a collection of unrelated frontier events, or a legend shaped by generations of retelling, the search continues. Somewhere among the forests, mountains, and abandoned trails of the West, the remains of that elusive cabin may still exist. Or perhaps the greatest mystery is why its story has survived for so long without a final answer. If the lost cabin mine represents the mystery of a discovery separated from its original landmark, the next legend takes us to a place where history provides a clearer beginning but a far less certain ending. The San Saba silver mines were not merely the subject of frontier stories. They were connected to documented expeditions, colonial ambitions, and a search for mineral wealth that drew explorers into the difficult landscape of central Texas. Along the banks of the San Saba River, the landscape appears calm and open. Rolling hills, limestone formations, and wide stretches of grassland define the region, creating a sharp contrast with the harsh deserts and mountains often associated with Western treasure legends. Yet, beneath this peaceful scenery lies a history shaped by exploration, conflict, and the persistent belief that extraordinary mineral riches once existed nearby. The story begins in the 18th century, when Spanish authorities expanded their presence throughout Texas. Like many European powers of the era, Spain viewed precious metals as a source of influence and economic strength. Reports of silver deposits in remote areas encouraged expeditions into unfamiliar territory, where officials hoped to establish mining operations and strengthen their control of the region. In the 1750s, Spanish explorers and missionaries established a settlement near the San Saba River, including the mission of San Saba de la Santa Cruz. The goal was not only religious conversion, but also the creation of a stable Spanish presence near areas believed to contain valuable resources. Rumors of silver deposits nearby played an important role in attracting attention to the region. However, the reality proved far more complicated. The mission faced serious challenges, including tensions with indigenous groups, limited resources, and the difficulties of maintaining a distant settlement. In 1758, the mission was attacked and destroyed, ending Spain's immediate efforts to establish a permanent foothold in the area. The destruction of the settlement added another layer of uncertainty to the silver legend. If valuable mines existed nearby, what happened to them after the Spanish withdrew? Historical records confirm that Spanish officials investigated mineral possibilities throughout Texas and surrounding territories. They also confirm that many reported discoveries failed to produce the wealth that explorers hoped to find. In the case of the San Saba silver mines, researchers have searched through colonial documents, archaeological evidence, and geological studies to determine whether the legendary deposits were real or simply the result of exaggerated reports. Geologists acknowledge that mineralization exists in parts of central Texas, but evidence of a major silver deposit matching the descriptions from 18th century accounts remains elusive. The absence of confirmed mine workings has led some historians to suggest that early reports may have been based on mistaken identification of minerals, exaggerated rumors, or incomplete exploration. Yet the legend has never completely disappeared. Over the centuries, treasure seekers have returned to the San Saba region searching for traces of Spanish mining activity. Some have focused on old maps and expedition records, while others have examined unusual rock formations and possible archaeological remains. Occasional discoveries of colonial artifacts have renewed interest, although none have provided conclusive proof of a lost silver operation. More speculative interpretations suggest that Spanish miners may have discovered a valuable deposit, but concealed its location after abandoning the region. Others believe that later generations confused separate mineral discoveries with the original San Saba reports, gradually transforming a historical search into a lasting mystery. The San Saba silver mines remain fascinating because they exist at the boundary between documented history and unresolved possibility. The Spanish presence in the region is confirmed. The search for mineral wealth is confirmed. The destruction of the mission is confirmed. But the final question remains unanswered. Did a significant silver deposit once lie near the San Saba River, waiting to be recovered, or did the promise of hidden wealth become a legend shaped by ambition, uncertainty, and the passage of time? Somewhere beneath the quiet hills of central Texas, the evidence may still exist, waiting to reveal which parts of the story belong to history and which remain part of the enduring mysteries of the frontier. If the San Saba silver mines reveal how the pursuit of wealth could shape entire chapters of frontier history, the next mystery turns from lost resources to a disappearance that left behind unanswered questions, legal battles, and a search for justice that continued for decades. This time, the uncertainty does not surround a hidden mine or a forgotten trail, but the fate of a prominent figure whose final journey became one of the most enduring mysteries of the American Southwest. In the open desert country of southern New Mexico, wide plains stretch between distant mountain ranges, interrupted by dry riverbeds, rugged mesas, and isolated roads that follow paths established long before modern highways existed. During the late 19th century, this landscape was both a place of opportunity and a region where disputes over land, politics, and personal rivalries could become deeply complicated. It was along one of these remote routes that Albert Jennings Fountain and his young son disappeared in 1896, creating a case that remains unresolved more than a century later. Albert Jennings Fountain was not an unknown figure. Born in 1838, he became a lawyer, politician, and military officer who played an important role in New Mexico's public life. He served in the territorial legislature, participated in legal disputes involving land and water rights, and gained a reputation as a determined advocate. His career brought him influence, but it also placed him at the center of conflicts involving powerful individuals and long-standing tensions in the territory. On the evening of February 1, 1896, Fountain and his 8-year-old son Henry were traveling by wagon near the White Sands region of New Mexico. They were returning home after a legal proceeding when they disappeared. Their wagon and belongings were later discovered along the road, but there was no clear explanation of what had happened. The horses were found nearby, and evidence suggested that the journey had ended suddenly. Yet neither Fountain nor his son was ever found. The disappearance immediately raised serious questions. Given Fountain's involvement in legal disputes, investigators focused on several possible motives. He had represented clients in conflicts involving land ownership, cattle interests, and regional power struggles. One theory suggested that enemies seeking revenge had targeted him because of his professional activities. Another possibility involved personal rivalries connected to the political environment of territorial New Mexico, where disagreements could extend beyond the courtroom. The investigation became one of the most significant criminal cases in the territory's history. Authorities examined evidence, questioned witnesses, and pursued individuals believed to have possible connections to the disappearance. Years later, several suspects were arrested and tried, including figures associated with frontier conflicts in the region. However, despite accusations and legal proceedings, definitive evidence proving exactly what happened to Fountain and his son remained difficult to establish. The lack of physical evidence has always been central to the mystery. Without recovered remains or a complete account of the events, investigators were forced to rely heavily on testimony, circumstantial clues, and conflicting statements. Witness accounts varied, and some information emerged long after the disappearance, making it difficult to separate reliable evidence from speculation. Historians have generally focused on the violent atmosphere of territorial New Mexico during this period. The region experienced frequent disputes involving land, livestock, political influence, and personal honor. Law enforcement systems were developing, and conflicts between established families, newcomers, and competing interests often created complicated situations. In that environment, the disappearance of a prominent attorney was not simply a missing person case. It reflected broader struggles within a rapidly changing society. Over time, alternative theories continued to circulate. Some suggested that Fountain had been attacked because of a specific legal case. Others proposed that the disappearance involved broader political conflicts that were never fully exposed. A few theories even questioned whether all available evidence had been properly examined. These interpretations remain debated because the absence of conclusive proof leaves room for multiple possibilities. Modern historians have revisited the case using archival documents, court records, newspaper reports, and historical analysis. These efforts have helped clarify the timeline and identify the people connected to the investigation, but they have not answered the most important question: what happened on that lonely road in 1896? The disappearance of Albert Jennings Fountain and his son remains one of the American West's most haunting historical puzzles. Unlike legends of lost gold or forgotten mines, this mystery concerns real people whose lives ended in uncertainty. The landscape where they were last seen continues to stand as a silent witness to an event that changed families, influenced legal history, and left generations searching for answers. More than a century later, the final moments of that journey remain unresolved, leaving behind the possibility that some evidence has yet to be discovered, or that the full truth disappeared with those who knew it. If the disappearance of Albert Jennings Fountain reveals how the frontier could conceal the fate of even the most recognizable figures, the next mystery returns to a different kind of uncertainty: the movement of wealth during a time of war and collapse. Unlike a single missing person, the story of the lost Confederate gold of the Southwest follows a trail of rumors, wartime decisions, and unanswered questions about what happened to valuable assets during the final days of the American Civil War. Across the deserts and mountain passes of the Southwest, the landscape carries evidence of centuries of movement. Dry river valleys, isolated trails, and remote crossings once guided soldiers, merchants, and travelers through some of the most challenging terrain in North America. During the 1860s, these routes became part of a larger struggle as Confederate forces attempted to maintain control of distant territories, while the outcome of the Civil War became increasingly uncertain. Among the many legends connected to this period is the belief that a portion of Confederate wealth was transported westward before the collapse of the Confederacy. According to traditional accounts, gold, silver, and other valuable assets were moved through the Southwest with the intention of preserving resources, financing continued resistance, or preventing them from falling into Union hands. Somewhere along those routes, the story suggests, part of that wealth disappeared. The historical foundation of the legend begins with the Confederate presence in the Southwest. During the early years of the Civil War, Confederate forces briefly occupied parts of the region, including areas of present-day New Mexico and Arizona. The Confederate territory of Arizona was established in 1862, reflecting the strategic importance of the region's location, transportation routes, and potential resources. However, Confederate control was short-lived. Union forces pushed southward, and the Confederate position in the Southwest weakened. As military circumstances changed, officials and soldiers faced the challenge of moving supplies, documents, and valuable materials through uncertain territory. In such conditions, the possibility that assets could be hidden, lost, or abandoned became part of the historical landscape. The question is not whether valuables moved during the war. Historical records confirm that both governments transported currency, military supplies, and important materials throughout their territories. The uncertainty lies in whether a significant Confederate treasure ever entered the Southwest and disappeared. Some accounts describe a wagon train carrying Confederate gold toward Mexico after the war had effectively ended. In these versions, the group faced attacks, desertion, or changing circumstances that prevented the treasure from reaching its intended destination. Other stories place the lost wealth near old military routes, abandoned mining regions, or remote mountain passes where travelers could hide valuable cargo and potentially return later. Could such a cache have existed? Researchers approach the question by examining the realities of Civil War logistics. Moving large quantities of gold across hundreds of miles of difficult terrain would have required careful planning, reliable transportation, and protection from competing forces. The Southwest in the 1860s was a complicated environment, involving Union troops, Confederate supporters, indigenous communities, independent travelers, and shifting alliances. A valuable shipment moving through this region would have faced significant risks. Historical records provide evidence of Confederate activity in the region, but they do not clearly document a specific treasure shipment matching the descriptions found in later legends. This absence has led many historians to suggest that the stories may have developed from smaller events rather than one large hidden fortune. One possibility is that the legend grew from the movement of ordinary wartime funds. Military officers, wealthy individuals, and political figures sometimes carried personal assets during periods of instability. If such valuables were lost or concealed, later generations could have expanded the story into something much larger. Another explanation involves the confusion surrounding the collapse of the Confederacy itself. In the final months of the war, Confederate currency lost much of its value, and officials attempted to protect remaining resources while facing defeat. Reports of missing funds, abandoned property, and destroyed records created an environment where rumors could easily develop. The Southwest's geography also helped preserve the legend. Vast deserts and mountain ranges contain countless isolated locations where evidence could remain undiscovered. A small collection of coins, a damaged wagon, or buried metal objects might be difficult to identify after more than a century of erosion and environmental change. Many historical trails have disappeared, and some routes used during the Civil War are no longer clearly visible. Treasure hunters have pursued various versions of the lost Confederate gold story for generations. Some have studied military maps and wartime correspondence, while others have followed local traditions passed down through families. Occasional discoveries of old coins, military artifacts, or abandoned sites have renewed interest, although none have been conclusively connected to a Confederate treasure shipment. More speculative theories suggest that certain individuals successfully recovered portions of the gold, but kept the discovery private. Others believe that political and military records may have intentionally omitted details about valuable assets transported during the final stages of the conflict. These ideas remain difficult to verify because they depend on evidence that has not been found or records that may never have existed. Modern researchers have approached the mystery with greater caution, using archival studies, historical geography, and archaeological methods rather than relying only on traditional treasure maps or oral accounts. Their findings often reveal a more complex picture. The Southwest was indeed a region of military activity, economic movement, and uncertainty. But separating documented events from later storytelling remains a significant challenge. The enduring fascination with the lost Confederate gold of the Southwest comes from the intersection of history and possibility. The Civil War is one of the most extensively studied periods in American history, yet moments of uncertainty remain, especially in remote regions where events unfolded far from official records. Somewhere along the old routes that cross the Southwest, there may have been valuables moved during a desperate period of war and transition. Perhaps the resources were recovered. Perhaps they were divided among those who carried them. Or perhaps some portion remained where circumstances forced it to be left behind. The desert preserves many traces of the past, but it does not always reveal their meaning. Among the forgotten trails, abandoned crossings, and rugged landscapes of the Southwest, the question remains open. Was there ever a significant Confederate treasure hidden away during the final days of the war, or did a collection of smaller events gradually become one of the frontier's most persistent legends? If the lost Confederate gold of the Southwest reflects how uncertain trails and wartime movements can leave behind unanswered questions, the next legend returns to the familiar world of frontier prospecting. This time, the mystery is tied not to armies or political conflict, but to a simple object that became a lasting symbol of survival in the wilderness. A cast-iron cooking pot left behind in the search for a fortune that was never found. Across the remote deserts and mountain ranges of the American West, old trails wind through landscapes where miners once searched for signs of precious metals. Dry valleys, rocky slopes, and isolated canyons offered both opportunity and danger. Prospectors often carried only essential supplies, moving between temporary camps and uncertain claims while following rumors of promising discoveries. In such places, even ordinary objects could become landmarks, preserving the memory of journeys that otherwise disappeared. Among these frontier legends is the story of the lost Dutch oven mine. The name itself comes from the traditional account of a prospector who reportedly left behind a Dutch oven near the site of a valuable gold discovery. According to various versions of the story, the abandoned cooking pot became the only recognizable clue connected to the location of the mine. The exact identity of the prospector, the region where the discovery occurred, and the details of the original find vary widely between accounts, creating a mystery that has proven difficult to separate from the many other lost mine stories of the West. The broader historical setting, however, provides important context. During the 19th century, mining communities expanded rapidly throughout the Western Territories. Gold and silver discoveries attracted thousands of prospectors, many of whom explored remote areas with limited maps and little official support. Small claims were often recorded briefly, worked for a short time, and then abandoned. In some cases, information about these sites disappeared when miners moved on, died, or failed to share precise details. A lost mine marked only by a simple object would not have been impossible under such conditions. Researchers examining the lost Dutch oven mine legend have considered several possibilities. One explanation is that the story may have developed from a genuine prospecting discovery that was never properly documented. A miner could have located valuable ore, established a temporary camp, and left behind personal belongings before circumstances prevented a return. Another possibility is that the Dutch oven itself became symbolic rather than literal. Frontier stories often preserved unusual details because they made locations easier to remember. A distinctive object, rock formation, or natural landmark could become the foundation of a legend even if the original event changed over time. The greatest challenge for modern searches is the uncertainty surrounding the location. Different versions of the story place the mine in various regions of the West, from desert mountains to isolated canyon systems. Without consistent descriptions or verified historical records, researchers must rely on geological clues, old mining reports, and comparisons with known prospecting routes. The landscapes associated with these legends create their own difficulties. Mountain passes can resemble one another, trails disappear through erosion, and natural formations change appearance depending on weather and light. A landmark that seemed unmistakable to a 19th century traveler may be nearly impossible to identify more than a century later. Some treasure hunters have proposed that the mine was deliberately concealed after its discovery, either by the original prospector or by later individuals who located the site. Others believe the legend may combine several forgotten mining events into a single story, blending real exploration history with generations of retelling. Modern geological surveys and historical research have improved understanding of Western mining regions, yet they have not provided a final answer. The absence of physical evidence leaves the story suspended between possibility and uncertainty. Perhaps the enduring appeal of the lost Dutch oven mine lies in the simplicity of its clue. A forgotten cooking pot, a remote landscape, and a story of hidden wealth represent the very essence of frontier exploration. Somewhere among the mountains and deserts of the West, there may have been a discovery that slipped beyond the reach of history. Or perhaps the true mystery is how a small object left behind by an unknown traveler became a legend that continues to invite the search for what might still be waiting to be found. If the lost Dutch oven mine reflects the way ordinary objects can become lasting symbols of forgotten journeys, the next mystery turns from hidden mineral wealth to something far more immediate, a missing shipment of money and the unanswered questions surrounding its disappearance. In the expanding communities of the American West, payrolls were not merely financial records. They represented the wages of workers, the stability of businesses, and the lifeline of remote settlements separated from established banking systems. The wide plains and rugged foothills of the frontier created a challenging environment for transporting valuable goods. Long stretches of open land connected isolated towns, mining camps, ranches, and military outposts. Travelers moved through regions where distances were measured in days rather than miles, and where a single journey could be affected by weather, mechanical failures, accidents, or human decisions. A payroll shipment traveling through this landscape carried both economic importance and considerable risk. One such story is connected to the Johnson County missing payroll, a lesser-known frontier mystery involving money that was reportedly lost while being transported through the American West. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, growing communities depended heavily on regular payroll deliveries. Mining operations, construction crews, ranching enterprises, and government facilities often required large amounts of cash to pay workers in areas far from major financial centers. These shipments were frequently carried by stagecoaches, trains, or trusted individuals who understood the dangers of frontier travel. According to accounts surrounding the Johnson County payroll, a shipment of money disappeared during transit, leaving behind uncertainty over what happened and whether the funds were ever recovered. Details of the event vary between sources, with different versions describing different routes, amounts of money, and circumstances surrounding the loss. Like many frontier stories, the basic outline has survived while specific details have become increasingly difficult to confirm. Historical records show that payroll thefts and financial losses were not unusual during this period. The American West experienced frequent robberies involving trains, stagecoaches, banks, and individual travelers. Some incidents were carefully documented, while others remained unclear because of limited communication, incomplete investigations, or the remote nature of the locations involved. The question surrounding the Johnson County missing payroll is not whether such a disappearance could have happened, but what became of the money afterward. Several possibilities have been considered. One explanation is that the payroll was stolen and divided among those responsible, leaving little physical evidence behind. Frontier criminals often understood the value of secrecy, and stolen funds could disappear quickly through trade, travel, or concealment. Another possibility is that the money was lost due to an accident, such as a damaged vehicle, harsh weather conditions, or an unexpected event that interrupted the delivery. Researchers examining similar frontier cases often rely on newspaper reports, court documents, business records, and local histories. These sources can provide valuable details, but they also present challenges. Newspapers sometimes repeated rumors before facts were established, and local accounts could change as stories passed from one generation to another. The landscape itself adds another layer of uncertainty. Remote roads and trails used during the period have often changed significantly. New construction, erosion, and natural shifts in the environment can make it difficult to identify the exact routes travelers once followed. A location that was recognizable to people living in the area more than a century ago may now be impossible to distinguish. More speculative theories have suggested that the missing payroll may have been deliberately hidden rather than simply stolen. Some believe that someone involved in the transport concealed the funds and intended to return later, while others propose that the money may still rest somewhere along an old route, untouched since the day it disappeared. These ideas remain difficult to verify because no confirmed evidence has connected a specific discovery to the missing shipment. Modern researchers approach such stories with a combination of historical analysis and caution. Financial records, transportation history, and regional archives can help establish what was possible during the era, but they cannot always resolve the gaps left by incomplete documentation. The Johnson County missing payroll remains a reminder that frontier mysteries were not always about gold mines or buried treasure. Sometimes they involved ordinary events made extraordinary by uncertainty, the movement of money, the risks of travel, and the unanswered questions left behind when something valuable disappeared. Somewhere along the old routes that connected the communities of the West, there may still be clues explaining what happened to that missing payroll. Perhaps the funds were recovered long ago, perhaps they were hidden beyond discovery, or perhaps the true story was altered through decades of retelling. Until new evidence emerges, the fate of the Johnson County payroll remains another unresolved chapter in the complicated history of the frontier. If the Johnson County missing payroll reveals how ordinary shipments could become lasting mysteries when they disappeared into the vastness of the frontier. The next legend takes us deeper into a landscape where history, conflict, and hidden wealth became intertwined. This time, the mystery is connected to a remote cavern in the Arizona desert, a place surrounded by stories of violence, survival, and a treasure said to have been left behind in the aftermath of a deadly encounter. The desert of southern Arizona stretches beneath a vast sky, where rugged mountains rise above dry valleys and narrow canyons cut through layers of ancient stone. In this region, water sources are scarce, travel is difficult, and the landscape has long demanded careful navigation. For centuries, indigenous communities, explorers, soldiers, and settlers moved through these lands, each leaving behind traces of a complicated past. Among the many locations connected to frontier legends is a site known as the Apache Death Cave, a place that has become associated with one of the Southwest's most debated treasure stories. The name itself comes from a tragic event recorded in regional histories. During the late 19th century, tensions between Apache groups, settlers, and military forces created a period of intense conflict throughout the Southwest. The Apache Wars, which lasted for decades, involved shifting alliances, military campaigns, and violent encounters across Arizona and neighboring territories. The Death Cave legend is often connected to this turbulent era, although many details have been shaped over time by oral traditions and later retellings. According to the commonly repeated account, a group of Apache warriors used a hidden cave as a refuge during conflicts with their enemies. At some point, a military or civilian group discovered the location, leading to a deadly confrontation. The details differ between versions, but the central theme remains the same. A remote cave became associated with loss, secrecy, and the possibility that valuable items were left behind. The treasure element appears in later interpretations of the story. Some accounts claim that valuables were stored inside the cave before the confrontation, including gold, silver, weapons, or items taken during raids and trade. Others suggest that the supposed treasure came from unrelated events that became attached to the location because of its dramatic history. Historical evidence confirms that valuable goods did move through the region during this period. Travelers, traders, military units, and mining operations transported supplies, currency, and personal possessions across difficult terrain. In a landscape where conflict was common and travel could be dangerous, hiding valuable objects was not unusual. However, proving that a specific cache existed inside the Apache Death Cave is far more difficult. Researchers studying the legend must first separate historical events from later storytelling. The Apache Wars are extensively documented through military records, personal accounts, and government reports. Yet many local legends developed outside official records, passed through communities where details changed over generations. A story that begins with a real event can gradually absorb new elements, including claims of hidden wealth, unexplored passages, or forgotten discoveries. Could the cave have contained valuable objects that were never recovered? Some researchers consider the possibility that personal belongings or trade items may have been left behind during a violent encounter. Small caches of weapons, tools, coins, or other objects would not be unusual in a conflict zone. However, the idea of a large treasure hidden inside the cave requires stronger evidence than tradition alone provides. The physical environment creates additional challenges. Caves in the Southwest can be difficult to locate, especially when early descriptions rely on landmarks that may have changed over time. Rock formations, vegetation, and erosion patterns can alter the appearance of an area significantly. A location that was easily recognized by people familiar with the landscape generations ago may now be difficult to identify. The search for the Apache Death Cave treasure has attracted treasure hunters who have examined maps, historical references, and local accounts in hopes of finding clues. Some have focused on the possibility of concealed chambers or overlooked areas within the surrounding terrain. Others have approached the story from an archaeological perspective, looking for evidence of human activity rather than treasure itself. Archaeologists generally emphasize that sites connected to historical conflicts require careful interpretation. Objects found in such locations may reveal important information about the people who lived there, the resources they used, and the events that occurred. A single artifact does not necessarily confirm a treasure legend, but it can provide valuable insight into the broader history of the region. Over time, several theories have emerged regarding the origin of the treasure story. One possibility is that the legend developed from genuine discoveries of historical artifacts, later exaggerated through repeated retelling. Another suggests that the idea of hidden wealth became attached to the cave because treasure narratives were common throughout the frontier. The promise of lost gold often transformed ordinary historical locations into places of speculation and exploration. More speculative interpretations propose that the cave contained valuables gathered during raids or stored for future use. Some versions claim that those who knew the location took the treasure away before outsiders arrived. Others suggest that the cache remains hidden, protected by the same remote landscape that has preserved the legend for generations. These possibilities remain difficult to evaluate because there is limited direct evidence. Without documented records, confirmed artifacts, or a clear historical chain connecting objects to the cave, the treasure aspect of the story remains uncertain. The line between historical possibility and folklore becomes increasingly difficult to define as time passes. Modern technology has changed how researchers investigate locations connected to frontier legends. Satellite imagery, geological mapping, and archival research provide tools that earlier generations of explorers never possessed. Yet, even advanced methods have limitations. Technology can identify landscapes and patterns, but it cannot recover missing memories or confirm events that were never recorded. The fascination with the Apache Death Cave treasure comes from the way several elements of the American West meet in one story. It involves a real historical period, a challenging landscape, and a legend shaped by generations of uncertainty. The cave represents more than a search for wealth. It reflects the broader questions that surround forgotten places and incomplete histories. The Southwest contains countless locations where conflict, migration, and exploration left behind traces that are still being studied today. Some discoveries have clarified the past, while others have only created new questions. The Apache Death Cave remains part of that ongoing conversation, standing as a reminder that not every chapter of frontier history has a simple ending. Somewhere within the desert landscape, there may still be evidence connected to the events that inspired the legend. Perhaps the story preserves a memory of something real that was lost with time. Perhaps the treasure was never more than a later addition to a place already marked by tragedy. Until stronger evidence emerges, the Apache Death Cave remains a landscape where history and uncertainty continue to exist side by side, inviting researchers to keep searching for the clues that may still be waiting to be discovered. If the Apache Death Cave treasure reflects how a real historical landscape can become surrounded by unanswered questions, the next mystery shifts from hidden places to a moment of action on the open road. The frontier was built on movement: mail coaches carrying letters, merchants transporting goods, and passengers traveling between isolated settlements separated by enormous distances. Every journey carried uncertainty, and every stagecoach route held the possibility of danger. Across the American West, old stage roads crossed deserts, plains, and mountain passes where travelers depended on careful planning and courage. These routes connected communities that were often days away from the nearest town, making the stagecoach an essential part of frontier life. Behind the familiar image of the wooden coach moving across the landscape was a complex system of drivers, guards, relay stations, and passengers who accepted the risks of travel in exchange for connection with the wider world. Among the many stories from this era is the Elkhorn Stagecoach Robbery, a frontier incident remembered for the questions surrounding the stolen valuables and the fate of those involved. The Elkhorn name is associated with stagecoach routes that operated during the period when transportation networks were rapidly expanding throughout the West. Stage lines carried mail, currency, business documents, and personal belongings across territories where law enforcement coverage was limited. A stagecoach robbery was not simply a theft. It could interrupt communication, damage local economies, and create fear along important travel corridors. Historical records confirm that stagecoach robberies occurred frequently throughout the 19th century. Some became famous because of the criminals involved, the dramatic circumstances, or the recovery of stolen goods. Others disappeared into local history, remembered mainly through newspaper accounts, family stories, and regional traditions. The Elkhorn Stagecoach Robbery belongs to the latter category, where the basic outline of the event has survived while many details remain uncertain. According to traditional accounts, a stagecoach carrying valuable cargo was attacked while traveling along a remote route. The exact location, date, and amount of money involved vary between different versions of the story. Some accounts describe a carefully planned ambush by experienced outlaws. Others suggest a smaller group of opportunistic criminals took advantage of an isolated stretch of road. The circumstances surrounding the robbery raise several questions. Who organized the attack? Was the stagecoach targeted because the thieves knew valuable cargo was being transported? And what happened to the stolen money afterward? To understand the possibility of such an event, it is important to examine how stagecoach transportation worked during the frontier era. Unlike modern travel systems, stage routes depended heavily on timing and local knowledge. Drivers followed established roads, but many sections crossed open country where natural obstacles, weather conditions, and human threats could create serious problems. Robbers often studied these routes carefully. They understood schedules, knew where coaches slowed down, and selected locations where escape would be easier. A narrow canyon, a steep hill, or an isolated stretch of trail could provide the advantage needed for a successful robbery. Yet, the greatest mystery in many stagecoach cases was not the robbery itself, but what followed. Stolen money and valuables were often difficult to recover. Criminal groups could divide the proceeds quickly, hide them temporarily, or abandon them during a pursuit. In some cases, rumors developed that stolen goods had been buried or concealed for later retrieval. These stories contributed to a larger tradition of lost treasures connected to outlaw activity throughout the West. The Elkhorn Stagecoach Robbery has attracted interest partly because of this possibility. Some versions of the story suggest that part of the stolen wealth was never recovered and may still remain hidden somewhere along the old route. Others believe that the valuables were eventually spent, divided among those involved, or recovered quietly without becoming part of official records. Researchers examining the story face the familiar challenges. Newspaper reports from the frontier era often mixed confirmed information with rumors. Witnesses sometimes provided conflicting accounts, especially when events occurred quickly and under stressful conditions. Over time, local storytelling could add details that made the event more dramatic while moving it further away from documented evidence. The Elkhorn Stagecoach Robbery remains compelling because it represents a moment when the frontier depended on movement through uncertain territory. A single coach carried more than passengers and cargo. It carried information, money, and connections between communities. When such a journey ended in violence, the consequences could extend far beyond the road itself. Unlike legends of lost mines, this mystery begins with a documented reality. Stagecoaches were robbed, valuables were stolen, and some cases were never fully explained. The uncertainty lies in the details that followed, the identities of those responsible, the destination of the stolen goods, and whether anything remains undiscovered. Somewhere along the forgotten paths once traveled by stage drivers and passengers, traces of that event may still exist. Perhaps records waiting in distant archives could reveal more. Perhaps the landscape still holds evidence of what happened on that remote road. Or perhaps the Elkhorn stagecoach robbery has become one more example of how the frontier preserved not only its history, but also the unanswered questions left behind. If the Elkhorn stagecoach robbery reveals how a single journey across the frontier could become surrounded by unanswered questions, the next mystery returns to the landscape that shaped so many Western legends, the remote mountains where prospectors searched for fortune and survival. Beyond the established mining districts and famous gold rush towns, countless individuals ventured into isolated regions following rumors of valuable deposits, often leaving behind only fragments of their stories. Among these legends is the Lost Soldier Mine, a tale connected to exploration, hardship, and the uncertain boundary between documented discovery and frontier folklore. The landscapes associated with the Lost Soldier Mine are typical of the American West. Rugged mountain ranges rising above dry valleys, narrow canyons carved by seasonal water, and remote areas where a traveler could move for days without encountering another person. These environments offered opportunity to those searching for precious metals, but they also created enormous challenges. A promising discovery could bring wealth, while a misplaced trail or sudden hardship could erase a location from memory. For 19th century prospectors, finding gold or silver was only the beginning. Developing a mine required equipment, transportation, labor, and a reliable route back to civilization. Many discoveries were abandoned before they became profitable. Others remained known only to the individuals who found them, especially when explorers lacked the resources to return. The story of the Lost Soldier Mine follows this pattern of discovery and uncertainty. Unlike some mining legends connected to a specific individual and a clearly recorded event, the Lost Soldier Mine exists through several versions of a broader frontier tradition. The central idea remains consistent. A soldier, or a person connected with military service, reportedly discovered a valuable mineral deposit in a remote area before the location was lost. The name itself has contributed to the enduring appeal of the story. A soldier searching for wealth in the wilderness suggests a journey shaped by duty, conflict, and personal ambition. Yet, the details surrounding the discovery are difficult to confirm, leaving researchers to examine where historical evidence ends and legend begins. During the 19th century, military personnel and prospectors frequently crossed paths throughout the Western territories. Soldiers stationed at frontier forts often traveled through remote regions, sometimes discovering natural resources or becoming involved in local mining activity. Military routes also passed through areas later explored by miners, creating opportunities for discoveries that were not always officially recorded. Historical records confirm that many military figures participated in Western exploration. Surveying routes, protecting settlements, and mapping unfamiliar regions were common responsibilities. It is therefore possible that the Lost Soldier Mine legend developed from a genuine encounter involving a soldier who discovered mineral deposits while traveling through uncharted terrain. The challenge lies in identifying which location, if any, matches the story. Some versions of the legend place the mine near mountain ranges where military activity and mining exploration overlapped. Others describe a lone soldier who became separated from his unit, discovered rich ore, and later attempted to return to the site. The details vary, but the outcome remains similar. The location could not be found again. This pattern appears often in Western mining history. A prospector might use natural landmarks to describe a location, believing that mountains, rivers, or rock formations would remain recognizable. However, without precise measurements or detailed maps, these descriptions could become almost impossible for later generations to interpret. A phrase such as 3 days beyond the ridge or near the unusual rock formation may have been meaningful to someone familiar with the terrain. More than a century later, those same descriptions can apply to countless places. Researchers investigating the Lost Soldier Mine have approached the story from several angles. Some have studied historical mining records to identify regions where valuable deposits were reported but never developed. Others have examined old military routes, journals, and maps in search of references that might connect soldiers with mining discoveries. Geological research has also played a role. The American West contains extensive mineral deposits, and many areas associated with lost mine legends do have histories of mining activity. The presence of gold or silver in a region, however, does not necessarily confirm the existence of a specific lost mine. One possibility is that the Lost Soldier Mine was a small but genuine discovery that was abandoned due to circumstances beyond the discoverer's control. A soldier may have lacked the ability to file a claim, transport equipment, or return to the location. Illness, reassignment, conflict, or financial limitations could all prevent a promising discovery from becoming a working mine. Another explanation is that the legend represents a combination of several events. Frontier stories often traveled between mining camps, military posts, and settlements, changing with each retelling. A discovery made by one person could become connected with the story of another, eventually creating a single legend from multiple historical moments. The possibility of deliberate secrecy has also been discussed. Some prospectors chose not to reveal valuable locations, fearing competition from others. A person who discovered a rich deposit might have protected the information until they could return with enough resources to develop it. If that person never returned, the location could have disappeared with them. More speculative interpretations suggest that the mine remains undiscovered somewhere in the wilderness, protected by difficult terrain and incomplete clues. Treasure hunters have searched areas connected with lost soldier mine stories, using old maps, geological information, and descriptions passed down through generations. However, these searches face significant obstacles. The Western landscape has changed dramatically since the era when these stories began. Forest growth can conceal old trails. Mining activity can alter terrain. Roads and settlements can transform areas that once appeared completely isolated. Even accurate historical clues can become difficult to apply to a modern environment. The role of military history adds another layer of complexity. Unlike civilian prospectors, soldiers often moved according to official orders. Their journeys were recorded through reports and correspondence, but personal discoveries outside their duties were not always documented. A soldier who found a promising mineral deposit might never have created a record that survived. Modern researchers continue to examine lost mine stories with a combination of historical investigation and geological analysis. Rather than searching only for treasure, many focus on understanding the people and conditions that created these legends. The stories reveal how individuals experience the frontier as a place of possibility, uncertainty, and constant movement. The Lost Soldier Mine remains fascinating because it represents more than a search for gold. It reflects the challenges faced by those who explored the Western wilderness and the fragile nature of information in an era before modern communication and mapping. A discovery could be known by only a few people, and if those individuals disappeared, the knowledge could disappear with them. The mystery continues because the evidence is incomplete. There may have been a real mine discovered by someone whose name was lost to time. There may have been several small discoveries combined into one enduring story. Or the legend may have grown from the imagination of communities fascinated by the possibility of hidden wealth waiting beyond the next mountain pass. Somewhere among the remote valleys and rocky ridges of the West, clues connected to the lost soldier mine may still exist. Perhaps an old trail, a forgotten marker, or an overlooked record could provide the missing piece. Until that evidence is found, the story remains suspended between history and legend, leaving one final question for those who continue to search. Was the lost soldier mine a genuine discovery lost to time, or another frontier mystery created by the endless possibilities of the wilderness? If the lost soldier mine reflects the uncertainty surrounding discoveries made in the wilderness, the next story returns to another defining feature of the American frontier: the movement of gold through dangerous and unpredictable landscapes. During the great era of Western expansion, gold was not only found in mountains and riverbeds. It was also transported between settlements, military posts, banks, and mining camps. Every shipment represented opportunity, but it also carried the risk of loss. Across the deserts and valleys of the Southwest, old routes once connected growing communities separated by enormous distances. Wagons carried supplies, mail, and valuable cargo along roads that were often little more than tracks across open terrain. These journeys depended on careful planning, experienced drivers, and favorable conditions. A single delay, accident, or encounter with criminals could change the fate of an entire shipment. Among the many legends connected to these frontier routes is the story of the Walnut Grove Stage Gold, a tale involving a valuable shipment, a dangerous journey, and the enduring question of what became of the treasure after it disappeared. The Walnut Grove name is associated with the Walnut Grove area of Arizona, a region shaped by rugged hills, dry valleys, and the challenges of 19th century transportation. During the mining era, communities throughout the territory relied on stage lines to move passengers, supplies, and financial resources. These routes connected isolated settlements to larger commercial centers and played a vital role in the growth of the American West. The stagecoach was more than a method of travel. It was a moving link between distant communities. A coach could carry letters, government documents, personal valuables, and sometimes large quantities of gold or currency. Because of this, stage routes became attractive targets for criminals who understood that a successful robbery could provide significant wealth. The story of the Walnut Grove Stage Gold is believed to have developed from this environment of opportunity and danger. According to traditional accounts, a stagecoach carrying a valuable shipment of gold was attacked while traveling through the Arizona wilderness. The robbers reportedly escaped with the treasure, but the gold was never successfully recovered. Over time, the possibility that the stolen wealth remained hidden somewhere in the surrounding landscape transformed the event into one of the region's many lost treasure legends. The historical difficulty with this story is determining exactly which details can be verified. Stagecoach robberies were common during the 19th century, and many were documented through newspapers, legal records, and personal accounts. However, stories involving lost treasure often changed over time. The amount of gold, the identity of those involved, and the exact location of the event could become uncertain as the story passed from one generation to another. To understand why such a disappearance was possible, it is important to consider the realities of frontier transportation. A stagecoach route through Arizona could pass through hundreds of miles of isolated territory. Drivers followed established roads, but many areas remained difficult to navigate. Water sources were limited, landmarks were essential, and assistance could be days away. If a robbery occurred in a remote location, investigators faced enormous challenges in recovering stolen goods or identifying those responsible. Criminal groups operating in the West often understood these conditions. They selected locations where coaches were vulnerable and where escape routes were available. A narrow pass, a remote valley, or a section of road far from settlements could provide the ideal setting for an ambush. Yet, stealing gold was only the first challenge. Transporting stolen valuables afterward created additional risks. Robbers needed to avoid law enforcement, divide the goods, and decide where to keep their wealth. In some cases, stolen property was recovered. In others, it disappeared completely, creating rumors that it had been buried, hidden, or abandoned. This possibility forms the foundation of the Walnut Grove stage gold legend. Some researchers have suggested that the treasure may have been concealed near the location of the robbery, with the intention of returning later when attention had faded. This method was not unknown during the frontier era. Individuals involved in criminal activity sometimes hid stolen goods temporarily, especially when immediate escape was more important than recovery. Another possibility is that the gold was never hidden at all. It may have been divided among those responsible and gradually spent or transported elsewhere. In this interpretation, the mystery survives not because the treasure remains underground, but because records of its final destination were never created. The landscape surrounding Walnut Grove has contributed greatly to the endurance of the story. Arizona's terrain contains countless isolated areas where evidence can remain difficult to locate. Mountain slopes, dry washes, and abandoned trails can preserve clues while also making them extremely difficult to discover. A location described in an old account may no longer appear the same today. Roads have changed, natural features have shifted, and many historic routes have disappeared entirely. A landmark that once guided travelers may now be covered by vegetation or altered by erosion. Researchers examining the Walnut Grove stage gold legend have used several approaches. Some have searched historical newspapers for reports of stage robberies in the region. Others have studied transportation routes, mining activity, and geographic features that might correspond with traditional accounts. Historical investigation can provide important context. The existence of stage lines, mining communities, and gold transportation routes is well documented. These records demonstrate that valuable shipments regularly moved through dangerous areas. The challenge is connecting those broader realities to one specific lost shipment. Archaeological research offers another perspective. Instead of searching only for treasure, researchers may examine historical sites for evidence of travel, conflict, and human activity. Items such as wagon parts, tools, coins, or personal objects can reveal information about past events, although they do not always confirm a particular legend. More speculative interpretations of the Walnut Grove stage gold story suggest that the shipment may have been larger than official accounts recorded. Some believe that the missing gold represented part of a significant transfer between mining communities or financial institutions. Others propose that those involved in the robbery possessed information about the route and timing of the shipment before the attack occurred. These theories remain difficult to prove. Without recovered gold, reliable documents, or direct testimony, the story remains open to interpretation. The legend also reflects a broader pattern found throughout Western history. During periods of rapid expansion, valuable resources moved through areas where formal systems of security were still developing. The same conditions that allowed communities to grow also created opportunities for theft, loss, and uncertainty. Modern technology has changed how researchers investigate these mysteries. Digital archives allow historians to access newspapers and records from distant locations. Geographic mapping tools help reconstruct historical routes. Geological and environmental studies provide greater understanding of the landscapes where these events occurred. However, technology cannot fully solve a mystery built on missing information. Maps can show where a road once existed, but they cannot reveal whether someone buried a treasure there. Records can identify historical patterns, but they cannot always explain the fate of a single shipment. The enduring interest in the Walnut Grove stage gold comes from the combination of history and possibility. The story is rooted in a real period when stagecoaches carried valuable cargo through challenging environments. The dangers of those journeys are well documented. What remains uncertain is the final chapter of this particular shipment. Was the gold recovered shortly after the robbery and simply removed from the story? Was it hidden somewhere in the Arizona landscape and never found? Or did the legend grow from a smaller event that became larger through years of storytelling? The answer remains unclear. The desert continues to preserve traces of the people who crossed it, from abandoned roads to forgotten campsites and remnants of earlier settlements. Somewhere within that landscape, there may still be evidence connected to the Walnut Grove stage gold. Perhaps a forgotten record, a historical discovery, or an overlooked clue will one day provide a clearer picture of what happened. Until then, the story remains another unfinished chapter of the American frontier, a reminder that beneath the wide horizons and quiet landscapes of the West, countless journeys ended without a complete record, leaving behind questions that continue to draw researchers back to the places where history and uncertainty meet. If the Walnut Grove stage gold represents the uncertainty surrounding a shipment that disappeared along a frontier route, the next legend takes us north into a different landscape, where dense forests, powerful rivers, and rugged mountains replace the open deserts of the Southwest. Here, the search is not connected to a stagecoach robbery or a lost military shipment, but to a single man, a reported discovery, and a story that has continued to attract explorers for more than a century. The mountains of southwestern British Columbia rise above deep valleys carved by glaciers and waterways that have shaped the region for thousands of years. Thick forests cover steep slopes, rivers cut through remote wilderness, and areas that appear accessible on a map can become extremely difficult to reach in reality. Long before modern roads and technology transformed the region, these landscapes demanded patience, knowledge, and endurance from anyone attempting to travel through them. Within this dramatic environment is the legend of Slumach's gold, one of the most enduring lost treasure stories in North America. The story centers around a man known as Slumach, a member of the indigenous community living in the Fraser Valley region during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Much of what is known about him comes from later accounts, newspaper stories, and oral traditions, which means separating documented history from legend remains a difficult task. According to the traditional story, Slumach discovered a rich gold deposit somewhere in the mountains near Pitt Lake in British Columbia. The gold was said to be unusually pure, and the location of the discovery was kept secret. Some versions of the story claim that Slumach worked the site alone, returning only occasionally with small amounts of gold. Others suggest that he deliberately protected the location because he did not want others to find it. The idea of a hidden gold source in the wilderness was especially powerful during an era when gold discoveries were transforming communities throughout western North America. The Fraser Canyon gold rush of the 1850s brought thousands of prospectors into British Columbia. New settlements developed rapidly, and reports of mineral wealth encouraged further exploration into remote regions. Gold was discovered in many areas, but the difficult terrain meant that countless valleys and mountain ranges remained only partially explored. The possibility that another rich deposit existed somewhere beyond the known mining areas was not impossible. However, the Slumach gold legend became more complicated because of the uncertainty surrounding its evidence. Historical records confirm that gold exploration occurred throughout the Fraser Valley and surrounding regions. Prospectors searched rivers, streams, and mountain areas for valuable deposits. Some discoveries were profitable, while others failed to develop because of isolation, transportation difficulties, or limited resources. The specific mine attributed to Slumach, however, has never been confirmed, One of the most repeated elements of the legend is that Slumach's gold was connected to a curse. According to later stories, anyone who attempted to find the mine would suffer misfortune. These accounts became popular through newspaper articles and books published decades after the events they described. Yet, historians examining the story have noted that many of these details appear to have developed through later storytelling rather than direct historical evidence. The real question is not whether the legend contains dramatic elements, but whether it began with an actual discovery. Researchers have considered several possibilities. One explanation is that Slumach may have known of a small gold deposit, but that the location was never accurately recorded. Indigenous communities often possessed detailed knowledge of their environments, including natural resources, travel routes, and seasonal changes. A location familiar to someone with generations of regional knowledge could be extremely difficult for outsiders to identify. Another possibility is that the story developed from misunderstandings about ordinary gold prospecting activity. A small discovery, a rumor, or a personal claim could gradually become transformed into a story of extraordinary wealth. The geography of the region has also played a major role in preserving the mystery. The area around Pitt Lake and the surrounding mountains is among the most challenging terrain in Western Canada. Steep cliffs, dense forests, unstable slopes, and unpredictable weather conditions make exploration difficult even with modern equipment. During the early 20th century, searching for a specific location in this environment would have been a demanding undertaking. Many treasure hunters have attempted to locate the legendary mine. Some followed descriptions from old newspaper reports. Others studied maps, geological formations, and traditional accounts for possible clues. Expeditions have entered remote valleys and mountain regions, often facing the same obstacles that challenged earlier explorers. Despite these efforts, no confirmed mine has been identified. The lack of evidence has not ended interest in the legend. Instead, it has created a debate over what kind of story Slumach's gold truly represents. Some researchers believe the legend may be based on a genuine gold discovery that was never recovered. They argue that the existence of gold in the region, combined with historical mining activity, leaves open the possibility that an undiscovered deposit could exist. Others take a more cautious approach. They suggest that the story grew from a combination of real events and later additions, shaped by the public fascination with lost treasures. During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, newspapers frequently published stories about hidden gold, abandoned mines, and unexplained discoveries. These accounts captured public imagination and often became larger with each retelling. The role of Slumach himself has also been examined more closely by historians. Later stories often portrayed him as a mysterious figure guarding an incredible secret, but the available historical record provides a more complex picture of a person living during a period of major social and economic change. Understanding the historical context helps separate the individual from the legend that developed around him. Another challenge is the absence of reliable location information. Lost mine stories often depend on landmarks, directions, or personal descriptions. Over time, these clues can become incomplete or distorted. A mountain peak may receive a new name. A trail may disappear. A river may change course. Without a precise starting point, even the most dedicated search can become an exploration of possibilities rather than a path toward confirmation. Modern researchers have approached the Slumach gold legend using different methods. Historical analysis examines newspapers, government records, and mining documents. Geological studies investigate whether the surrounding area contains deposits consistent with the story. Geographic technology allows researchers to study remote landscapes in ways earlier explorers could never have imagined. Yet, the central mystery remains. A legend built around a hidden mine requires evidence from the ground, not only stories from the past. Without recovered gold, verified artifacts, or documentation connecting a specific location to Slumach's account, the mystery remains unresolved. The story continues to fascinate because it represents a recurring theme in frontier history: the possibility that valuable discoveries existed beyond the reach of ordinary knowledge. Across Western North America, individuals searched for wealth in landscapes that were larger and more complex than they could fully understand. Some discoveries were documented. Others were abandoned. Some became legends. The Slumach gold story exists in that uncertain space between possibility and proof. Perhaps a genuine gold deposit was discovered and later lost among the mountains surrounding Pitt Lake. Perhaps the original event was smaller than the legend suggests, transformed over time by the hopes and imagination of those searching for fortune. Or perhaps the greatest discovery connected to the story is not gold itself, but the way a single frontier tale can survive for generations. The forests and mountains of British Columbia continue to stand as they did when prospectors first entered the region. Beneath those slopes and along those remote waterways, the landscape still holds countless traces of human activity. Whether the evidence of Slumach's gold remains waiting to be found or exists only within the stories passed down through time, the question remains open. Somewhere in that vast wilderness, is there still a forgotten place that explains why this legend has endured for more than a century?